Hello everyone, welcome to PMI-OC webinars. My name is Paya Ibrahimi and I will be your host today. After introducing our sponsor and speaker, the presentation starts. During that time, you can ask your questions using the question and answer box on the right side of the screen. After the presentation, you will receive the codes for your PDUs. Then your questions will be answered by the speaker. But first, let me thank UCI, our sponsor, who made this webinar possible. I would like to invite Brett Shahian, Marketing Program Manager at UCI, to tell us more about their activities. Brett?
Hi everyone, my name is Brett and I represent the brand new Applied Project Management Certificate Program at UCI. Take a moment to hear this student success story about our program and reach out to myself or Vanessa Lowe with any questions. Our contact information will be shared with you following this event, and remember that members of PMI-OC receive a 10% discount on all project management courses at UC Irvine. Thank you.
I currently work in marketing and human resources for a pharmaceutical company. Many of the companies that I was looking into require the certificate program. And so I researched and found UC Irvine, and I thought, well, this I think would be a great way for me to improve my skills, but also show on my resume that I have formal training. And I felt that this was going to be a good move to improve my chances. Even though I had project management experience in the past, going through the program really laid out the methodology. I was able to bring what I've learned from the program and implement it into my work duties, and so in turn my projects have benefited from better quality, time, and budget. Well, knowing that these instructors have this amazing experience, it was an honor to listen to their stories about how they've handled problems and how they've handled what they've done to be successful in their careers. You really get to learn from the mistakes they've made, real life mistakes in their industries, and you get to learn how they've implemented the methodology and how effective it is. You're not going to learn all this stuff in a book. You're going to learn it by coming to the program and learning from the instructors. I genuinely felt like they cared about me and me being successful. They wanted me to learn. They insisted that I learned. They're going to help you get to where you want to go.
Thank you, Brett. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, even though he needs no introduction. Amir Khamseh heads the PMO of Surgical Heart Valve Therapy Business Unit at Edwards Life Sciences. His team is responsible for NPD, regulatory, clinical, and marketing projects and programs for the division. His medical device project management background also includes St. Jude Medical and Advanced Serialization Products, a division of Johnson & Johnson. Amir has earned his PMP, PGMP, and PFMP credentials and is the president of our chapter, the PMI Orange County, a chapter with more than 1,800 members. I invite Mr. Amir Khamseh to take the control of the microphone. Amir?
Paya, thank you very much. Can you folks hear me? And I presume you can. First of all, thanks again, Paya, for the warm introduction, and also thanks to our sponsor, UCI. It was an honor to have them supporting us, and as you see, if you participate in their program, there is a discount if you're an Orange County Project Management Institute member. So we're going to start the presentation soon, and I will ask the assistance of Paya with that. Okay. So our critical chain methodology. And what is the scenario situation here is I'm going to compare the critical chain methodology to the standard waterfall critical path methodology that we in the PM world are accustomed to. And I want to focus on a couple of elements here, no pun intended, of this introduction slide. So the whole effort of critical chain methodology is with regards to establishing credible schedules and focused advancement. I think the quote that we have from our great philosopher Confucius says that very well in terms of a man that's chasing a dog that's chasing two rabbits does not catch either. And so that's my criticism of our approach right now in terms of multitasking. That's a 4-letter word that I want us to move away from. There's no value or benefit in multitasking. That's one of the elements that we as human beings right now have. We actually take great pride to say that we multitask, and I want us to move away from that. So with the assistance of Paya right now, the controls. Paya, next slide, please. Okay, so here's our agenda. As you can see, we're going to start the why, the business case. How do we define success? What's success? I'll get into what is critical chain methodology, the concepts and differences between critical chain and critical path, waterfall, and all that stuff. Change management. Concepts and differences. We said the change management and the conclusions. So next slide, please. All right, here are some disclosures. I'm going to be talking about the methodology and not the specific tools and processes and software for critical chain. So critical chain methodology is a system that's provided by several suppliers right now. The one that I use, our team uses at Edwards Life Sciences, is ProChain. That's one of many. So I'm not going to go to the details. I'm not a spokesperson for them. I have no criticism for them, but I don't want us to get into the details on that. So I'm just going to go at very high level in terms of the methodology, the culture, the mindset. That's really the most important thing. So high level, yep. And if you've heard my presentations and discussions before, I always show that projects and programs constitute a portfolio. So whenever you see in the slide that I say program, it could be project, vice versa. Projects and programs all add up to the portfolio. So think of it that way. And the last item in here is that in the methodology for critical chain, when they talk about the uncertainty time that's compiled, they call it buffers. I don't like that word because buffer has a negative connotation. Buffer, when you speak to people, we talk about a buffer. They're like, oh, okay, so yeah, what are you hiding, and what are you faking, and things like that. So instead of use buffer, I prefer to use the word contingency, because every task, every project, every program will have to have some additional time uncertainty built into it. So rather than calling it buffer, we'll call it contingency. Next slide, please. All right, the why in business case. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so here I'll let you read this in terms of the business case. So what is it that we're doing? We obviously want to advance the portfolio for your business in terms of tools and systems with a standard project management opportunity that does what? Well, you want to improve the predictability. It's going to increase and improve the predictability. You want to reduce the durations of the activities. Why? So that you can get to market faster, you can support customers, make sales, and so on. And then last but not least, and I'll emphasize this in the latter slides, is in terms of the visibility and decision-making criteria that's needed when you need help, when you have to escalate, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. All right, so the optic here is very important. So if you look, we're talking about these elements. We're talking about adoption, experience, and result. So pay attention to those. And look at these pain points. If none of these pain points apply to your world, then my apologies for wasting your time, and you're more than welcome to disconnect, because this is the whole purpose, is to talk about how we can address these pain points. If any of these pain points, and I guarantee you in my life all of these pain points apply and work, if any of these pertain to you, then this discussion is relevant. So think about these in terms of deliveries, overloading team members, so on and so forth. If these apply, great, you're in the right place. If not, then like I said, you're more than welcome to leave, because I wasted maybe 5-10 minutes of your time. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to start talking about the success criteria. And on this slide, okay, so here's an example. Please, this is not gospel. This is not the law. Take a look at this information. In my team, we established some goals, metrics, and success criteria to the methodology. So read it as you wish. Effectively, put up some goals. How are you going to measure those goals? And what criteria do you establish to determine success? So one of them, the bottom one, for instance, is team engagement, right? So a goal is to ensure team engagement. What success criteria will you use? We use surveys. So we have recurring surveys that go out and ask questions and get some feedback. And the success criteria is based upon the response rate in terms of the positive versus negative. That's an example. That's just one example of many. Take a look at this information on the slide. I'm not going to bore you with it. Read the information, establish your own goals and metrics and success criteria, whether it's for this methodology or others. I'm using it for this methodology, and I'll prove to you why it makes sense. So I'll let you folks read it for a few more seconds, and then after that, if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, critical chain methodology. What is critical chain? All right, so if we have one more click. Critical chain consists of tools, processes, and culture, and I'm going to emphasize culture. So yeah, like I said, it's got softwares. It's basically an add-on to Microsoft Project, okay? So if you want to go to the supplier, that's what they do, but that's the least of what they do. They establish some processes on how you're going to plan your schedules and do the work, and most importantly, you have to change the mindset. Right now, we always worry about when are you going to start? When are you going to start? How long are you going to take? As opposed to how fast can you finish things? So worry about the finish versus the worrying about the start. Worry about the focus versus the multitasking, and worry about priorities instead of multitasking. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So if we go to the next click, in terms of critical chain methodology. So again, it's not just software, I already said that, and it's not just for us. It's not just for the PM community. It's for all of the cross functions. It's for the leadership. It's for the team members. Everybody's got to be on that boat for critical chain methodology for it to work. And then last but not least, one more click. Yep, it's not easy, but it provides great benefits. And I'll show you that in the next few slides. So if we go to the next slide, and we go to the concepts in critical chain methodology. All right, here's a nice little scenario. Business as usual operating system. So this is the typical workday that we have right now. And correct me if I'm wrong, but see if it makes sense. You tell your partner, your better half, that you're going to go to work from 8 to 5 to complete a task. So let's start the clock by clicking it. So, okay, so their expectation is, yeah, okay, you went from 8 to 5, and you're going to work on task, right? Well, yeah, but did you take any breaks? So let's see what happens if you take a break. Yeah, that's true. I took a lunch. Okay, so that's it, right? So the rest of the time you're working on a task. Well, yeah, but there was some other stuff. I had to respond to some emails. Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough, but hey, the meat of the day is still on task 1, right? Well, yeah, but, you know, there's some other distractions in there. Oh, okay, but still, the meat of it is the blue, right? There's nothing else, right? Well, we have meetings. This is a good day. We only had 2 meetings. Usually you have more than 2 meetings. Oh, all right, so you had some meetings, but still, I see most of the work is still blue, task 1, right? That's it, right? Well, yeah, my boss came to me and asked me to work on an additional task. So that was task number 2, and he said that it was very urgent. She said it was very urgent. Okay, so you have to split between task 1 and task 2. So nothing else, right? Well, what happens is whenever I switch from the most important task 1 to other tasks, I have to actually ramp down. So I have to defocus from 1 and look at what I'm going to do instead. And then when I go back to 1, I have to remember where did I leave off, so I got to ramp back up. So we don't have a very good picture here, right? So if we have one more click, remember we promised that we're going to spend some family time at home after 5 o'clock, go home and spend some time till 10 p.m. Yeah, that's not going to work. So one more click. And if we look at the scenario of how little time, emphasis on little time that we actually spent on the task at hand, task number 1, guess what's going to happen next? You're going to be making a phone call to say, yeah, I'm going to be home late because I have to finish up some stuff. So that's business as usual, and that's not a very good business to have. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the challenges that we have in our current project management world. So we do a click. Human behavior. Okay, so let's go click one more time and look what happens when we're assigned a task. You're assigned a task with a due date, remember? So you've got a deadline. And how soon can you start? The expectation that you have is, yeah, it's okay, because the expectation is, I think I'm going to finish that a lot sooner than the due date. So what happens next? Oh yes, Parkinson's law kicks in, right? Remember that one? So you assign a task that's a duration of X, you're going to stretch the work out so that you finish by time X, right? So even though you think you'll finish it in 1/3 the time or 1/2 the time, you will make it happen so that it goes to time X. And is that the only situation? No, because what happens next? Oh yeah, a favorite friend, student syndrome, which does not mean that you have to be 18 years old. It can happen when you're 48 years old. You start an activity, you say, oh yeah, like I thought, it's not going to take that long. Okay, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, I'm going to go do some other things, I'll do multitasking, I'll help somebody else, and I'll come back to it towards the latter part, and I'll finish it just in the nick of time, right? Sure, sounds good, but did we forget somebody? Yeah, we forgot our dear friend Murphy. So we go back, we start it back up, but it was more than what we expected, and we ran into some problems. So what happens is we don't finish on time. So that's the situation that we're in right now. You have a start point, you have a duration, you have a deadline, and you miss those deadlines. So if we go to the next slide. Current methodology. Deadline management. That's the world we live in. And so what are the three-legged legs on the stool? Multitasking, like I said, uncertainties that I'll describe, and sharing resources. So let's talk about those three elements. Multitasking, uncertainties, and shared resources. If you go to the next slide. I'm going to give you guys an exercise. And please, by no means am I expecting you to do it right now. Just make a note of this, and after the meeting, tomorrow, this weekend, whenever, do it yourself, do it to a friend, with a friend, give it to a spouse, significant other, and let's do a multitasking exercise. Very simple. Take a sheet of paper and write the letters of the alphabet on one side of the sheet. Break it down such that the first line is A through J, the second line is K through T, and the last line is U through Z. Once you complete those three lines, then turn the paper over to the other side and write numbers. Write numbers from 0 to 9, 2 times, and the third line just goes 0 to 5. Is there anything fancy about this? No. Is there any logic or philosophy to this? No. It's just the whole principle of doing 2 tasks, but separately. So you're going to complete task 1, which is letters of the alphabet, in 3 lines, and then task 2, the numbers 0 through 9, on 3 lines, and the third line 0 to 5. If you don't like it, if it's too confusing, make it 0 to 9 for the third line. It's not a big deal. Letters of the alphabet in 3 lines, and numbers in 3 lines. Do them successively. Do them in series, not in parallel. Time yourself. And of course, I'm in medical device, so we always say quality, 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 but it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Quality matters. Please pay attention. Have quality results. Make sure it's not sloppy. Make sure you don't write the letter J too many times. Make sure you don't skip a number. So quality matters. Time yourself. So that's an exercise where you're doing 2 tasks in successive nature. If we go to the next page, we're going to do the same thing. Letters of the alphabet on one side, numbers on the opposite side, but I want you to multitask. So that wonderful multitask scenario, right? So I want you to do the letters with A, B, C, then you switch the paper, flip the paper over, and you do the number 0, 1, 2, you flip it back, you do D, E, F, flip it over, 3, 4, 5, flip it back and forth so you can read the instructions. And if it's confusing, you can have all the letters on one side and 3 rows of numbers, 0 to 10, it doesn't matter, 0 to 9, excuse me. Quality matters, but the whole purpose is you're multitasking. You're starting something, not finishing it, you're going to another task. Starting it, not finishing it, go back to the first one. And very simple, boring exercise, but just time yourself and compare the timelines for exercise number 1 and exercise number 2. And if we go to the next slide, let's take a look. So you were asked to do 2 tasks. In one scenario, you did them successively. You did them in series, and the other one, you did it in parallel. And so if we do the clicks, one more click, multitasking versus focused activity, and then this finally the answers on these questions. Okay, efficiency. Which one was more efficient? And you have to ask yourself, efficiency does not mean that which one was cleaner, because quality matter, but which one was faster, which one was more resolute. And I don't think it took rocket science for you to figure that out. So if we look at the next question, what about value? So the end result is you're providing a product or service to a customer. That's the definition of a project, right? So you're providing 2 tasks, let's say to whatever, your teacher. Letters of the alphabet and numbers. So what value did it provide for you to do them in parallel versus in series? I mean, the teacher still is going to get the letters of the alphabet and numbers, but were they accurate? Were they appropriate? Were they timely? Which one make more sense? The next question. Quality. Did you repeat the letters? I would guess that if you did, you had it more in the case of multitasking than the focus work. Did you miss some numbers? If you did, that would be case of the multitasking. Was it as clean? Was it sloppy? Was it messy? And I guarantee you that the focused effort would have higher quality than multitasking. And you could argue that, nope, both of them were perfect. Okay, if both of them were perfect, then guaranteed the multitasking took longer. So the next question, experience. How did you, as the performer of this task, feel with regards to the activities in the task? Which one was more stressful? Which one made you think twice about things? Which one had you check things more frequently than you would? In the case of the focused effort, you were left alone, you did a task, you completed the activity, you went on the next thing. The other one, you have to keep flipping back and forth. It's like, oh, wait, let me go back. Did I really put J? Because I thought I put J. I'm not sure if I put J. So on the bottom line, you know, what do we conclude after this is there really a value to the multitasking or not? And that's the last bullet in this slide. So think about that. And why are we doing this? Why do we take pride to say, yeah, I can do several things concurrently? Some people even call it power tasking, right? Well, that's just a fancy way of saying that you're multitasking with a focused effort. But instead of that, why don't you just do focused efforts? So let's go to the next slide. Here's another example of multitasking. So it's very plain, very simple, very non-real world. I don't care. I'm just giving you a scenario. You've got 3 tasks, 3 projects, 3 activities, A, B, and C, and you're doing them concurrently, multitasking, right? So you do a little bit of A, and then you switch to a little bit of B, and then you switch to a little bit of C. And let me see if I messed something up. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I think I can still see you guys. So pardon me. Let me go back. Okay. So A, B, and C, you're doing them, and then at the bottom, the horizontal axis shows the total duration to complete all of those activities. Now let's click and see what happens if we were to prioritize these activities. So again, it's very simple. A is number 1 priority, B is number 2, C is number 3. Nothing magical. It could have been B is number 1. It doesn't matter. It's just an exercise. But what if we were to prioritize those activities And then what will happen if we click one more time, if you were to start A, followed by B, followed by C. Oh, so A is going to be done first, then you work on B, and then you conclude with C. So look at this. Not only are all of the activities completed ahead of the prior approach, but if you, leadership team, determine that A or B or C are important, look how much sooner A completed versus the original where it was in the fourth quadrant. So you're saving a lot of time by prioritizing and focusing the activity on a task or activity or project. So that was another example. If we just click, we can go through the conclusion and we can go to the next slide. Multitasking is very wasteful. Okay, so I reside in wonderful Southern California, as maybe most of you folks that are on this webinar do as well, and we get to enjoy our wonderful traffic for Southern California as shown on the map. And so if someone was to ask me, Amir, how long does it take for you to go from work to home? I would say, well, an average, you know, the mean, the mode is about, I don't know, 15 minutes. And then so what are the excursions? It could be 15 minutes plus 10 minus 5. Oh, okay. So you've got your focus time. The activity is 15 minutes to drive home from work. And then you got some uncertainty of plus or minus, you know, plus 10 minus 5. Okay, we got our focus time, we got our uncertainty. Now, Amir, what would you say in terms of your focus time and uncertainty if I were to say that your estimations will determine your salary next year or your bonus next year? Well, oh, in that case, okay, so it's still going to take me about 15 minutes to get home, but uncertainty, it could be 15 plus 25, and yeah, still minus 5. Oh, well, what happened? Well, you know, I may get a flat tire, I may get a call to go pick something up at the store, I may stop at the bank, I may be low on gas, I got to go to the gas station. So my focus time, the drive is still 15 minutes, but I'm going to accommodate for the additional uncertainty. So the uncertainty is no longer the fact of, yeah, it could be a little bit because of traffic, but, well, also there's additional activities. It could be other tasks, things like that. So that's an example. If we go to the next slide, we have your work, which is the focus time, 15 minutes for the drive home from work, and then you got your uncertainty. And if we click one more time, we have the traditional durations, right? So you got your work, we're going to add our uncertainty, but now, if we keep clicking, we're going to add the associated additional factors that go in. So similar to they said that, yep, you're going to put your bonus on that. Oh, well then, you know, I'm going to put in some safety factors. So if we keep additional safety factors that we keep clicking, then we'll see what happens. So you got some other tasks. You know, I may have to stop at the gas station, and also the fact that if you go to the gas station, well, you're going to have to stop at the parking lot, you have to start your car, stop your car, and all that stuff. So we put some protections in, right? Everybody does that. It's not just the fact of the drive home, but also every task and projects and programs. So if we click one more time, we'll see what happens. The overall duration has some protection. Not just some, but a lot of protection, right? Some of it's unnecessary, and some of it's necessary. So if we click one more time, what happens is, remember, we always worry about how soon can you start and how long do things take, right? So there's no incentive for any specific element, task in a project or program to finish early. Why? Because all you're worried about is covering your butt, making sure that you accommodate for every excursion. And hey, as long as I promised X weeks and I finish it in X, then I'm safe. If I finished it in half an X, I'm not going to report that. I'm just going to go do something else, do a third thing, and provide the results like I promised in the original time of X. Remember back to Parkinson's law? So if we go to the next slide, let's see. We've got our focus time. We've got our uncertainty. In critical chain methodology, they call it low risk duration estimate. And what we'll do is we'll get rid of the extraneous elements that you see to the right. So if we keep clicking, yeah, we want to minimize, if not eliminate, the latter part, and we want to consolidate the uncertainty. So critical chain methodology is based upon focused work, accepts and realizes uncertainty, but eliminates multitasking and extraneous, what we call buffers. I'll call it buffer this time. So go to the next slide. Project uncertainty. So this is a simple example. Again, nothing fancy, right? There's 10 elements that constitute a project or a task or a program. Each element has focused work, focus time, and it has uncertainty, right? Nothing special about that. And I'm making it very simple. This project is in series. So none of the tasks can be done in parallel. Okay, so no criticism there. It's just a simple example. So if we click one more time, what makes sense? Does it make sense to take the elements of this project, compile them, take all of the uncertainties and compile them? Is this the duration that we want to give to the project? Or, if we click one more time, should we take the uncertainties and take a certain percentage of the uncertainty and establish that as the overall contingency? So it's not the fact that uncertainty won't happen, but it's the fact of getting away from the scenario of everything will need more time, everything will go wrong, everything will need more people. So the focus time has not changed. The uncertainty is a percentage of the overall buffer, contingency, whatever you want to call it. What percentage? There's no gospel, there's no law, there's nothing that says it's got to be 50% of the overall, but it's, of course, project program dependent. So it depends, right? That's the favorite word, it depends. If it's a complex project, maybe it's a culmination of all of the uncertainties and take 90% of that. So only reduced by a little bit. If it's a simple project, maybe more, 50%, 60% can be reduced. The whole effort is that the overall project or program now has a duration that's less than the original estimate. How much less, the team determines, but it's not the fact that it's less so it's better, it's less but it is more credible. And then the following slides will prove my argument about credibility. If we go to the next slide. So we've talked about the elements that I mentioned, multitasking, the four-letter word, uncertainty, and then resource leveling. So here's the resource leveling. Here's the beauty of critical chain methodology. And if you don't believe in the methodology, then please just use this approach for your projects and programs. So the current situation in terms of a project or program, this is a very simple example again. You've got certain tasks, and let's not even worry about the fact that you took critical chain approach of putting the contingencies at the end. You can keep them at the specific buffers of every element. You're going to finish at the black diamond point. The black diamond point estimation of finish that you give to the team and you give to leadership and you give to customers and stakeholders is based upon the fact of running these activities, and some are in parallel. So if you pay attention, you've got a couple of activities that involve a design, and you got a couple of activities that involve development, and you only have one person in design and one person in development. So here you've got concurrent activities, and do they make sense? Because you're going to have the shared resource multitask. So if we click to the next scenario, a better approach, a resource leveled approach, which is what Critical Path proposes, advocates, and uses, is to set up the activities such that they make real world sense. So as you can see, sure, some things like prototyping can be done in the original plan, but whenever you have a situation where you have a shared activity, you have to put them in priority. So design number one, development number one has to precede development number two. And you establish your timeline, you didn't change anything else, and you create your credible schedule. So the first challenge or criticism you give me is that, yeah, well, look, the black diamond now is a lot later than the first one, so how did that help? Critical chain was supposed to make things faster. No, The argument here is that critical chain will give you a credible schedule. So at the starting point of your project or program, you establish the diamond as your endpoint. If that endpoint diamond is not acceptable to the team, stakeholders, customers, leadership, you say, okay, then we need more people. We need more designers. We need more development people. We need more money or whatever. Or you can say, this is the end goal with the available resources, love or leave it, but I will give you high confidence in meeting that goal of the black diamond. So there are ways to make the second scenario faster, shorter, by getting more help and so on and so forth. The more important fact is that you have confidence in the date of that black diamond. In the first scenario, perhaps it was a latter part, the 11th hour of the project, where you're like, well, yeah, because of the shared work, we're running behind. So that's a surprise, that's an unacceptable surprise, and that's a disappointment, and so on and so forth. In the second scenario, you tell them right up front. If they don't like it, you come up with a better solution. But when they accept the proposal, the solution, the scenarios, the constraints, you and the team have an opportunity to meet those goals. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, this is just to prove the resource leveling. And please, while I'm doing this, as I indicated at the start of the presentation, please provide questions in the online system. Don't wait until the end. Of course, we could do it at the end, but write them up, and then we can answer the questions at the end, of course. And I'll leave time Q&A at the end. So here's a good comparator of the traditional critical path, waterfall versus critical chain. And people immediately say, well, what's the word path versus chain mean? Critical chain is critical path with the focus on the chain being for resource leveling. So remember, we talked about multitasking. We talked about the scenario of resource leveling, and we talked about the uncertainties. So when you have a resource level schedule, so the red boxes show critical chain. The red boxes could be critical path. It's just the fact that the critical chain will be resource leveled. So look at the traditional waterfall. You're going to end your project program at the rightmost bar for the last box. Critical chain, you finish it at the black line. You have all of your contingencies in a shared protection bucket to be used by anyone and everyone in the team, not for a particular specific selfish person or user. And the critical chain, of course, is the critical path elements. They must be resource leveled, and those are the ones that take the longest time for you to complete. Let's move on to the next slide. So you're going to say, all right, you've talked about, finishing, you've talked about priorities, you've talked about focus, you don't want to talk about deadlines anymore. And at the task level, true, yes, at the specific element of the project, we don't worry about a deadline, we worry about finishing fast. So true, at the task level, no, we don't worry about a deadline, we worry about going fast. However, at the next point, which is the overall project level, we absolutely care about deadlines. So of course you have to have deadlines. You have to have deadlines to milestones. You have to have deadlines to the end goal. So of course you meet those, and you saw those at the black bar at the end. It's just a fact of, let's not get hung up for each element having an endpoint. Let's get hung up on how fast we complete elements, how we ensure that we don't multitask, how we have the appropriate resources allocated, and then of course, last but not least, is how we make sure that the critical path activities get the priority. So if you keep clicking, here we have example. Sure, the milestone's got a deadline. Milestone 2's got a deadline. And it's not just the fact that we got rid of deadlines. You just don't worry about a deadline for each and every one of the red and green boxes. We worry about the critical path ones, the red boxes, in terms of deadlines. Go to the next slide. Here's my favorite part. So whether you use critical chain methodology or not, this is a subsequent element, output, for critical chain methodology is the fever chart, progress report, whatever you want to call it. And this is an optic for you to share how the project or program is progressing. So the horizontal axis, the x-axis, shows the activities in terms of percentage for the project to complete. The start point, you just started the project. The end point, you finished it. The vertical axis, the y-axis, is how much of the contingency is being used. So you progress your performance on a weekly basis in terms of how much you're doing on the project versus how much of the contingency you've used. So below example, the bottom example is a very simple project with 3 tasks, and then you've got the contingency at the end. So if we start clicking, we will see what happens on the chart when we complete activities. So task A was supposed to take a certain amount of time. Well, that's what the team projected. They only finished a portion of what they projected to finish, not to the amount that they should have. So they start using some of the contingency, right? So if we make one more click on the chart, it'll show what happens. So after week 1, yep, we're progressing towards the right. So we're moving along the x-axis, but we're using some of the y-axis. So we are going into a little bit of the yellow zone because of the fact that we use contingency at a higher percentage level to what we accommodated in terms of project progress. So team is alerted, leadership is alerted, you come up with some alternatives, they get more people, they get some overtime, they get more help. If we click one more time to see the next week, so the next week, if we click one more, we progress. Okay, so now we're making some recovery. It's not perfect. We were going to finish all of task A, so we maybe finished only 80% of it, but we didn't use as much of the contingency as the prior week, so we recovered some of the contingency. Not perfect, but if we click one more time to see how we progressed on the chart, you'll see that, okay, so we're not only progressing along the x-axis, but we're not using as much of the contingency on the y-axis. And so this is a weekly report that you share with the team, leadership, stakeholders, customers, whatever, and then you can apprise each other on how you're performing and progressing. So this slide is a perfect example of a project that completed. So again, the x-axis, I don't have to describe, that's the activities on a weekly basis. Each bullet is on a weekly basis. The buffer, contingency, as I prefer, is the y-axis. And the end goal is to get to the top right. So if you get to the top right or any point on the vertical axis below the top right, it's fantastic. In this project, they finished at the midpoint of the vertical axis. So they did not use all of their contingency, which is fantastic, right? The end goal is not to finish at 100% and 0 contingency. That would be the perfect world, which doesn't happen. It's not real. But if you did, great. If you finish at the top right, kudos to you. You promised the date of the top rightmost vertex, and you finished there. Any point below the top right vertex is gravy because you beat what you projected. And your projection has high confidence. So go to the next slide, and this will this will show the examples of what happened. And this is the real world. So nothing's going to be perfect. You're never going to lie along the x-axis. You're going to be reasons, and look, in certain scenarios, you actually fell backwards. You're progressing, but the first instance of going bad is because something went wrong. Well, when it goes wrong, it's not like, okay, yeah, well, we'll work better next time. It's like, no, you got to recover. You got to do some root cause. You got to get new parts, so on and so forth. So you fell behind. So the team reacts, responds, asks for money, asks for people, asks for whatever. If leadership, stakeholders, customers agree, you get it, and you progress. So long story short, this is a way to track your performance. And by no means am I advocating that you should always ask for money or ask for people. By no means am I saying that you will get acceptance to those, but you can show the respective stakeholders, parties, if we don't do X, we will not meet the goal. So here, this next slide, critical chain methodology, if we click through, what is it? It's a new way, right? It's a new way. It's a new way of thinking, not just doing the projects, it's a new way of thinking, methodology, culture. What else? Yeah. So do priority work. And you can argue that, we don't set priorities. Leadership does not give us priorities. Well, if they don't, then you have to establish priorities and have them argue with you or differ with you or change your priorities. As I've always said, focused work, not multitasking. Get away from that. Focused work. What else? Relay race, right? So what are you doing? Who's waiting for you? Hand off a baton. Effectively, I got to do task A. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to give it to Joey, Jack, Jill to do task B. You don't want them waiting or wondering if you're done. You hand them the baton and say it's yours. So here's just a simulation of what the real world is talking about. And of course, the whole beauty of that fever chart progress report is when you have problems, you ask for help. You may not get it, but you ask and you say, if we don't get help, then this will happen. So you're avoiding the 11th hour, the surprises, why didn't somebody say something, so on and so forth. So if we keep going, change management, I'll go through the slide pretty quick. And effectively, this will work for any methodology. It's not just for critical change. You have your inputs. You have to go through the phases of what you're going to do to resolve it. And then the output, in this case, is you have to change the culture. You have to change the mindset for not just the team, not just leadership, but the entire organization, the change in methodology. And if we go to the next slide, here's a roadmap that we used in terms of the change. So as you can see, the swim lanes we have are engagements, communications, and training. So effectively, you want to get not just, like I said before, the PMs, you want to get the team members, you want to get leadership, stakeholders, everybody engaged, make them understand why the change, why the methodology, what's going to happen. No more can a boss or somebody come and say, hey, can you help me with this? Hey, this would be really quick. Can you just take a few minutes to do this? And the answer is no, I can't. I'm working on task one. I have focus on task one. Do not distract me. So you got that. You got a communication. Nothing wrong with communication. Over communicate. Talk, meetings, whiteboards, emails, phone calls. And of course, training is you have to not just train the PMs, but the team members, the leaders, so on and so forth, and get them out of the mindset about, well, okay, what are you doing? What's next? How soon are you gonna start? As opposed to, how fast will things finish? Go to the next slide. Some examples, some guiding principles. Here's an example. Take a look. I'll let you read this. Again, the importance is prioritization, focus, move away from multitasking, and when will things start? Go to the next slide. Here's an example. So it's not gospel, it's not the letter of the law, but the table shows excellent scenarios that you want to indoctrinate not just yourself, but everybody in the group in terms of, like what I said already, right? Prioritization over responsiveness. We talked about the speed over the deadlines, and you can see all of the other ones as well. How fast can you go instead of when are you going to start? So let's look at this slide. This is a very good slide. Values, the paradigm, and the results. So if we start populating this slide, here's the current scenario that we have in terms of the values. You can see that. This is the lifestyle that we leave: responsiveness, getting started, deadlines, individual goals. If you look at the paradigm, so yeah, of course, you're going to do that. You need multitask. And then what happens as a result? Like I said, 70% are late, 30% are liars. So what do we do now? Well, how do we respond to responsiveness? What do we do it in its place? Let's get priorities. What about getting started? Let's not worry about getting started. Let's start focusing on finishing. What about deadlines? Speed, right? Individual goals. Let's think about project or team goals. Multitasking, my favorite. Let's get out of that mode. The relay race, right? Now, what does that do to the projects? Yeah, should get better. Next slide. And we're wrapping up. So the conclusion here is, you already saw this, right? So my point is that if any of these pain points pertain to you, then absolutely think about this methodology. If you don't have the effort, the time, the money for critical chain, if nothing else, please take away that fever chart approach with your current work style and use it. Think about prioritization. Think about focusing. If you don't have the authority to prioritize, do the focus work. Use the fever chart. Look to see how you could enable yourself to get away from these pain points. And that concludes my presentation, which should give us a little bit of time of questions and answers. And Paya, assist me with that one, please. Thank you.